What would you do if you started receiving reviews for rides you never gave? How would you react when those reviews described conversations you'd had in private, far from your car? And what if you discovered that someone had been documenting your entire life, rating your performance as a human being? My name is Jason Miller, and I've been driving for Uber in Springfield, Missouri for 2 years. It's a decent college town, population around 170,000, big enough to stay busy but small enough that you start recognizing regular passengers. I'm 29 years old, moved here from Kansas City after my divorce, trying to rebuild my life one ride at a time. The pay isn't great, but it's flexible, and I've worked hard to maintain my 4.92 star rating. That rating matters more than most people realize. Drop below 4.6 and Uber starts sending warning emails. Drop below 4, 5 and you can be deactivated. Your entire income gone because a few passengers decided you weren't friendly enough or took a route they didn't like. So I obsess over that number. I check it daily, sometimes hourly, watching it fluctuate with each new review. On October 18th, I completed my usual Thursday night shift. 6 rides between 7 p.m. and midnight, mostly college students heading to or from Missouri State University. Routine trips, polite passengers, no problems. I went home feeling good about the night, expecting my rating to stay steady or maybe tick up a point or two. The next morning, I opened the app to check my stats, and my stomach dropped. My rating had fallen to 4.7. I'd lost 0.05 of a point overnight, which meant someone had given me a 1 or 2 star review. But which ride? I mentally reviewed each passenger from the previous night. Nobody had seemed unhappy. Nobody had complained or given any indication of dissatisfaction. I clicked through to my recent reviews to see if they'd left comments. Most passengers don't write anything, just assign a star rating and move on. But someone had left detailed feedback. The review was dated October 18th at 11:47 p.m., which would have been my last ride of the night. 2 stars. The comment read, "Driver was distracted and unprofessional. Spent the entire ride talking about his ex-wife and how she took everything in the divorce. Made me uncomfortable. Would not recommend." I stared at the comment in confusion. I hadn't talked about my ex-wife at all last night. In fact, I'd barely talked to any of my passengers beyond basic pleasantries. My last ride had been a quiet college kid who'd spent the entire trip on his phone. We'd exchanged maybe 10 words total. This had to be a mistake. Someone leaving a review for the wrong driver, or some kind of app glitch. I contacted Uber support through the help function, explaining that the review appeared to be meant for someone else, that I hadn't had that conversation with any passenger. The response came back within an hour. "We've reviewed your concern. The review was submitted correctly and matches your ride on October 18th at 11:43 p.m. Pickup at 847 East Cherry Street, drop-off at Springfield Mall. Passenger, Michael Chen. We cannot remove accurate reviews." But that was impossible. I remembered Michael Chen. Quiet kid, early 20s, had picked him up from an apartment complex and taken him to the mall. The ride had lasted 12 minutes. He'd sat in the back seat staring at his phone. We'd talked about the weather for maybe 30 seconds. I definitely hadn't discussed my divorce. I tried calling Uber support directly, but after being on hold for 40 minutes, I gave up. They were notorious for having terrible customer service. Besides, it was just one bad review. It had dinged my rating, but not catastrophically. I'd earn it back with good rides. Over the next week, I continued driving as usual. My rating stabilized, even ticked back up to 489. I almost forgot about the weird review. Then on October 25th, it happened again. I finished a Friday night shift, 9 rides total, all seemingly positive. Checked my rating the next morning, 484. Another significant drop. I pulled up the new reviews. 2 of them from the previous night, both 1 star, both with detailed comments. The first, driver made inappropriate comments about his therapist, said she doesn't understand his problems, and he's wasting money on sessions. Very unprofessional, needs to keep personal issues to himself. The second, Driver complained about his landlord the entire ride. Said his apartment is falling apart and the landlord refuses to fix anything. Don't want to hear about your problems, dude. Just drive. I felt ice in my veins. Both reviews described things that were true about my life. I was seeing a therapist, Dr. Sarah Winters, and I had been frustrated with our recent sessions. I felt like we were going in circles, not making progress on my depression and anxiety. And yes, my landlord was terrible. My apartment had a leaking bathroom sink that had been scheduled for repair for 3 weeks. But I hadn't discussed either of these things with any passengers. Not a word. I kept my personal life separate from work. That was basic professionalism. I checked the ride details. The first review was from a passenger named Jennifer Walsh, pickup from a restaurant downtown, drop-off at a residential address. I remembered her. Mid-30s, professional-looking, had taken a call from her sister during the ride and barely acknowledged me. We'd said hello and goodbye. Nothing else. The second review was from David Torres, pickup from the university, drop-off at a house in a nearby suburb. I remembered him too. Graduate student based on his backpack and the textbooks visible on his lap. He'd been reading the entire ride, highlighted passages with intense focus. We'd exchanged maybe 5 words. Neither of them could have heard me talk about my therapist or my landlord because I hadn't talked about those things. Not in the car. Not anywhere near them. I called Uber support again, this time managing to get an actual human on the phone after a 50-minute wait. I explained the situation, how these reviews were describing conversations that never happened. The support representative was polite but unhelpful. I understand your concern, sir, but we have no evidence that these reviews are inaccurate. They were submitted by verified passengers who completed rides with you. Unless you have proof they're false, we can't remove them. How would I prove a conversation didn't happen? I can't record my rides, that would violate passenger privacy. You're just taking their word over mine. Our system shows these are legitimate reviews from real rides. I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do. After hanging up, I sat in my apartment trying to make sense of this. 2 possibilities. Either these passengers were lying for some reason, making up conversations to hurt my rating. Or somehow they'd overheard me talking about these things elsewhere, and were attributing it to the ride. But that didn't make sense either. I'd never met Jennifer Walsh or David Torres before their rides. How could they have overheard private conversations? Unless someone was following me, listening to my conversations, then posing as passengers to leave reviews based on what they'd heard. The thought made my skin crawl, but it also seemed paranoid and absurd. Who would go to such elaborate lengths? And why? I decided to be more careful, to pay closer attention to my passengers, to the things I said even in private, to who might be listening. On October 29th, I had a conversation with my friend Marcus at a coffee shop. We'd been friends since high school, and he was one of the few people I could talk to honestly about my struggles. I told him I was thinking about quitting Uber, that the stress of maintaining my rating was making my anxiety worse. You need the income, though, Marcus pointed out. What else would you do? I don't know. Maybe go back to retail. At least there I'm not being rated by every customer I interact with. But retail pays less. You'd have to move to a cheaper place. Maybe that would be good. Fresh start, different city. Get away from all the reminders of the divorce. We talked for about 40 minutes, sitting in a corner booth at the coffee shop. Nobody was close enough to overhear our conversation. I was sure of it. That night I drove a normal shift. 7 rides, all routine, no issues I could identify. But the next morning my rating had dropped to 478. The review was from a passenger named Sarah Mitchell. 1 star. Comment: driver spent the whole ride complaining about his job. Said he wanted to quit Uber and move to a different city. If you hate your job that much, why are you still doing it? Bad attitude. I checked the ride details with shaking hands. Sarah Mitchell, pickup from a grocery store, drop off at an apartment complex. I remembered her. Young woman, maybe 25, had been on a phone call the entire ride, animated conversation with someone about weekend plans. She'd barely acknowledged my existence. She couldn't have heard me complaining about my job. because I hadn't complained about my job during her ride. I'd had that conversation hours earlier at the coffee shop with Marcus. Someone had been at that coffee shop. Someone had been listening to my private conversation. Then that same someone had taken an Uber ride with me later and left a review describing what they'd heard. But Sarah Mitchell was a real passenger. I'd driven her to a real address. Unless she was working with someone else. Unless she'd been given information and told to leave a fake review. I was spiraling into paranoia. I knew it. But I couldn't stop it. Someone was documenting my private life and weaponizing it against my rating, and I had no idea who or why. Over the next week, it continued. Every few days, a new one-star review would appear, each describing things I'd said or done in private. A review mentioning that I'd forgotten to take my anxiety medication that morning, something I'd realized while brushing my teeth in my own bathroom with no one around. A review describing a phone call I'd had with my mother about visiting her for Thanksgiving. A review mentioning that I'd been watching YouTube videos about moving to Denver. My rating dropped to 471. The warning emails from Uber started arriving. Your rating is below our quality standards. Please review our community guidelines and work to improve passenger satisfaction. I became obsessed with finding out who was doing this. I started documenting everything. When I spoke to someone, what we discussed. I took photos of my passengers, comparing them to people I'd seen in public places before the rides. I recorded my conversations at home using my phone's voice memo app, just to prove what I had and hadn't said. But I couldn't find a pattern. The passengers leaving bad reviews were all different people. Different ages, genders, backgrounds. They had nothing in common except they'd all ridden with me and then left reviews describing things they couldn't possibly know. On November 8th, I confronted one of them. A passenger named Robert Hayes had left a review saying I'd complained about my therapist not helping with my depression. I looked him up on social media, found his Facebook profile, and sent him a message. Hey Robert, I was your Uber driver on November 7th. I'm confused about your review. You said I talked about my therapist during the ride, but I don't remember that conversation. Can you help me understand what happened? He responded within an hour. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never taken an Uber with you. I don't even use Uber. I sent him a screenshot of the review, showing his name and the ride details. His next message was disturbed. That's not me, that's my name, but I didn't write that review. I don't have an Uber account. Someone must be using my name. Do you know anyone who might do that? Anyone who has access to your information? No, this is really creepy. Should I report this to someone? We both reported it to Uber, explaining that someone was creating fake accounts or using stolen identities to leave fraudulent reviews. But Uber's response was the same. They had no evidence of account fraud. The reviews appeared legitimate. They couldn't be removed. I started staying home more, avoiding public conversations, trying to give whoever was watching me less ammunition. But the reviews kept coming. They started describing things I did alone in my apartment. How I'd rearranged my furniture, what I'd ordered for dinner, what time I'd gone to bed. Someone had access to my home, or they were watching through my windows, or they'd installed cameras somehow. I searched every inch of my apartment, checked for hidden cameras and smoke detectors, air vents, outlets, found nothing. Called my landlord to ask if anyone had accessed my unit. He claimed nobody had been inside except me. My rating dropped to 4.63. One more bad review and I'd be deactivated. I'd lose my income, I'd have no way to pay rent, everything would collapse. On November 14th, I received a notification that I had a new review. I was terrified to open it. When I finally did, my hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. 5 stars. The comment read, "Excellent driver, very professional, comfortable ride, highly recommend." I checked the passenger name, Catherine Hayes. I didn't remember driving anyone by that name recently. I checked my ride history. There it was, November 13th at 9:23 p.m. Pickup from an address I didn't recognize, drop off at another unfamiliar location. But I hadn't driven on November 13th. I'd stayed home all day, too anxious to work. I hadn't accepted any rides. I certainly hadn't picked up Catherine Hayes. Someone was now creating fake positive rides to counteract the negative reviews. Or maybe to show me they could manipulate my account completely. They could add rides I'd never done, reviews I'd never received, alter my entire history. I called Uber support, and after an hour of arguing, finally convinced them to check the GPS data for that ride. The route showed my car traveling from one part of Springfield to another. Except my car had been parked at my apartment the entire night. I had garage security footage to prove it. "This is impossible," I told the support rep. "My car was never at these locations. Someone is fabricating rides in my account." "Sir, our GPS data is very reliable. If it shows your vehicle at these locations, that's where it was." "But it wasn't. I can prove it wasn't." "I'm sorry, but our system shows otherwise. Is there anything else I can help you with today?" They didn't believe me, or they didn't care. Either way, I was trapped in a system that someone else was controlling, and nobody would help me. That night, I got a text message from an unknown number. "You should check your email, Jason." I opened my email app. There was a new message with no sender name, no subject line, just an attachment, a video file. I almost didn't open it, but morbid curiosity won out. I downloaded the file and pressed play. The video showed me in my apartment. Multiple clips stitched together. Me talking on the phone with my mother. Me having coffee with Marcus. Me in my therapist's waiting room. Me sitting in my car before shifts, psyching myself up to be friendly. Me at the grocery store, at the gym, at the bank, everywhere. Hours of footage. Someone had been following me for weeks, recording everything. The video was titled, "Jason Miller, Performance Review." A text overlay appeared. Subject exhibits consistent anxiety and depression. Fails to maintain professional boundaries between personal and work life. Rates poorly on emotional stability. Shows signs of paranoia and social isolation. Overall performance, 2.7 stars out of 5. The video ended with a final message. "Everyone is being watched. Everyone is being rated. Your Uber rating is just the part you can see. But we rate everything, every conversation, every decision, every moment of your life. And we're not the only ones watching. This is bigger than you think, Jason. The question is, will you keep trying to improve your rating, or will you finally understand that the ratings themselves are the prison?" I dropped my phone, backed away from it like it was contaminated. Someone had been surveilling me constantly, recording my life, rating my performance as a human being, using my Uber account as a delivery mechanism for their psychological torture. But why? What was the purpose? To drive me insane? To study my reaction to loss of privacy and control? To prove some point about surveillance capitalism? I called the police, showed them the video, filed a report about stalking and harassment. They took it seriously, I'll give them that. They interviewed me, documented everything, sent the video to their tech forensics team. But they couldn't identify who sent it. The email was routed through multiple proxy servers. The phone number was a burner. The video metadata had been stripped. Whoever was doing this knew how to cover their tracks. "Have you made anyone angry recently?" the detective asked. "Ex-girlfriend? Former employer? Someone from your past?" "Nobody. I keep to myself. I don't have drama with anyone." "What about your divorce? Could your ex-wife be involved?" "She moved to California 2 years ago. We haven't spoken since the divorce was finalized. She has no reason to do this. People don't need good reasons to do crazy things. We'll look into it." They never found anything. The investigation went nowhere. I was left with the knowledge that someone was watching me, rating me, controlling my Uber account, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. My rating continued to drop. More negative reviews appeared, now describing things from my childhood, from my marriage, from conversations I'd had years ago. Things nobody could know unless they'd accessed my medical records, my therapy notes, my personal files. On November 22nd, my account was deactivated. "Your rating has fallen below our minimum standards. You are no longer eligible to drive for Uber. Thank you for your service." I'd lost my income, but more than that, I'd lost my sense of security. If someone could manipulate my Uber account so completely, what else could they access? My bank accounts? My credit cards? My identity? I stopped going out, stayed in my apartment with the curtains closed, covered my laptop camera with tape, turned off my phone unless absolutely necessary, became the paranoid shut-in that the surveillance had predicted I'd become. Then yesterday, I received a package, no return address. Inside was a printed document, 50 pages of detailed notes about my life. Every place I'd been, every person I'd spoken to, every word I'd said, all organized and analyzed. At the end was a final rating. Jason Miller, overall life performance, 2.3 stars. Recommend termination of subject monitoring, case closed. And a note. Congratulations, Jason, you've completed our study. You were selected randomly from Uber drivers in mid-sized cities to test psychological responses to loss of privacy and control. Your reactions were within expected parameters. The data has been valuable. Your participation is no longer required. Please resume normal activities. Your Uber account will be reactivated within 24 hours with a restored 4.92 rating. Thank you for your cooperation. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if this was really just a study or if that's another layer of the psychological torture, making me think it's over, making me believe there was a purpose, when really it's just cruelty for its own sake. My Uber account was reactivated this morning. Rating, 4.92, exactly what it was before all this started. All the negative reviews are gone. My ride history shows only legitimate trips. Everything has been reset. I got a ping 10 minutes ago. A ride request. Pick up at 847 East Cherry Street, the same address where this all started on October 18th. I'm sitting in my car right now, parked in my garage, staring at that ping. 15 seconds left to accept. The rational thing would be to decline it, to never drive for Uber again, to quit this whole system that was used to torment me. But I need the money. I need to work. And if I refuse, what happens? Do they come back? Do they escalate? Or was it really over, and refusing now would just be paranoia? The ping expired. I didn't accept it. A new one appeared immediately. Same pickup address. Same sense that someone is testing me, seeing if I've learned my lesson, seeing if I'll comply. 5 seconds left. My finger hovers over the accept button. I don't know if I'm being watched right now. I don't know if everything I do is still being recorded and rated. I don't know if this nightmare is truly over or if it's just entering a new phase. But I know one thing. I'll never look at a ride rating the same way again. Because now I understand that the ratings aren't just about the ride. They're about control. They're about power. They're about reducing human beings to numbers and watching how we scramble to keep those numbers high. We're all being rated. Every moment, every decision. The Uber rating is just the only one we can see. The question is, now that you know that, what will you do? If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more unsettling tales. Drop a comment below. Have you ever felt like someone was watching you? Ever had information about your private life show up in unexpected places? Share your experiences. And remember, every time you rate someone, every time you're rated, you're participating in a system bigger than you understand. The ratings go both ways, and someone is always watching. Sleep well.